Good day, and welcome to the Daily Article Podcast for Friday, August the 2nd, 2024. I'm Chris Elkins with the Denison Forum, narrating today's article written by Dr. Ryan Denison. Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich and former US Marine Paul Whelan were among 24 prisoners from 7 countries who were released from Russian captivity yesterday in one of the largest prisoner exchanges between Russia and the West since the end of the Cold War. While the government has been working to free Gershkovich for more than a year and Whelan for longer than that, news of the exchange still comes as a surprise to most. Clues that something was going on began to emerge late Wednesday as a number of high-value prisoners and dissidents began to disappear from the prisons where they had been confined. As Reuters reported, at least 6 special government planes were confirmed to have traveled across the country to regions known to house political prisoners. Russian law requires that they receive an official pardon from President Vladimir Putin prior to any exchange, a process that began on Tuesday when he signed a number of secret decrees in Moscow. Similar steps were taken to gather prisoners in the United States, Germany, and a host of other countries before the exchange took place in an airport in Ankara, Turkey. In total, 16 people were released from Russian custody, while 8 were freed by Western nations. The most high-profile prisoner was Evan Gershkovich. He was arrested on charges of espionage in March 2023 while reporting from Russia. While both the American government and the Wall Street Journal, where he had been employed at the time, denied the charges, he was detained and then convicted last month. Prior to the exchange, he faced 16 years in prison. He was the first American journalist to be charged with espionage in Russia since the Cold War. Given the backdrop of the war in Ukraine, most viewed him as a hostage rather than a criminal. Whelan's tale is much the same. A citizen of the U.S., Canada, Britain, and Ireland, he was in Russia to attend a wedding when it's claimed that a Russian citizen gave him a flash drive with classified information on it. He denied any knowledge of the drive's contents, and the U.S. government has long held that he is innocent of the charges. Still, he was tried and sentenced to 16 years in prison back in June of 2020. Despite many attempts to include him in previous prisoner exchanges since then, he had remained a Russian prisoner until yesterday. Among others set free were Alsu Kamasheva, a Russian-American editor for Radio Free Europe, and several Russian opposition leaders such as Ilya Yashin, Vladimir Karmuza, and Oleg Orlov. But while the return of those wrongfully imprisoned is a source of joy and worthy of celebration, it's important to remember that their freedom came at a cost. Perhaps the most controversial of the 8 prisoners released to Russia is Vadim Krazikov, a Russian citizen facing life in prison in Germany after he was convicted in 2019 of assassinating a Chechen separatist fighter in central Berlin. During his trial, German prosecutors indicated that Krazikov was working for the Russian Federal Security Service, while the judge suggested the order to commit the murder came from President Putin directly. The Kremlin denied any involvement, but Putin has since praised Krazikov as someone who, quote, due to patriotic sentiments, eliminated a bandit in one of Europe's capitals, end quote. Also returned to Russia were a convicted computer hacker, 2 alleged Russian sleeper agents jailed in Slovenia, an intelligence operative accused of passing American-made electronics and ammunition to the Russian military, and an academic in Norway accused of being a spy. House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Michael McCaul spoke for many when he remarked, I am thrilled Evan, Paul, Alsu, Vladimir, and many others who have been illegally held by Putin's regime are finally coming home to their families. But I remain concerned that continuing to trade innocent Americans for actual Russian criminals held in the U.S. and elsewhere sends a dangerous message to Putin that only encourages further hostage-taking by his regime. So how can we embrace the joy of seeing the innocent released when it's accompanied by the fear that the path taken to get there will only lead to more people sharing their fate in the future? In an ideal world, governments would only arrest those who have committed a crime, and the kind of political calculus McCall laments would be unnecessary. However, we don't live in an ideal world on this side of heaven. We never will. I doubt that comes as a surprise. What's interesting, though, is that despite the general understanding that the world is a fallen place filled with sin and suffering, there's something in us that recognizes it shouldn't be that way. William Barclay put it like this: "The true wonder of human beings is not that we are sinners, but that even in our sin, we are haunted by goodness, that even in the mud, we can never wholly forget the stars." As Christians, that should give us hope. No matter how much the culture rejects God and embraces a worldview that stands in contrast to His, that spark of His identity with which every one of us was created will never be fully snuffed out in this life, according to Genesis 1:26. Consequently, every person you meet has the potential to come to know Jesus as their Lord and Savior, and the God who loves them enough to send His Son to die to make that salvation possible doesn't give us the option of giving up on any of them. That doesn't mean we naively ignore the evil around us or take an unrealistic view of the world. But a realistic view must leave room for God's immeasurable capacity to redeem that evil and bring good from it. And when we allow despair and anger to rob us of that hope, we give up on much of our ability to take part in that good. So, the next time you are tempted to look at the world and focus on all that is wrong, remember God's call to see beyond the sin that surrounds us and to keep your eyes fixed on Him instead. Let's start right now. Listeners like you support Denison Forum's mission to deliver news discerned differently. As a ministry nonprofit, we are fully donor supported. To partner with us, please donate today using the donate link in our show notes.